There it is. Hooray.
I think it's working. We will find out. And then somehow, apparently, I can sit here and it'll tell me how many people. We have 0 viewers right now.
Well, let me take that opportunity to say, since we have not had a show for a while, I seriously have 25
Community things.
community links, but I figure if I rip through them at like 3 to 5 seconds a piece, it's just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty worthwhile. There's a lot of good stuff coming out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll give it another, 35, it's ticking up. People are chomping at the bit.
Hooray.
Wait, is there stand-up? Is there stand-up? Yes, it's on right now. All those people, I'll just answer you on Twitter by talking. It's on right now. 63, okay, that's enough. Welcome, everybody, to the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. I'm coming at you from my deathbed, and I have driven in just so I could set this up because I know so many people want to see the community stand-up. And I said there would be a special edition, and then all these people are like, oh, what's going to be special? Are they making some announcement? I'm like, no, it's just special because A, we're on this week and we haven't been on for a few weeks, and B, it's not Hanselman because he's not here, and C, he's on vacation, and C, it's on a Thursday.
Tuesday.
Because if we didn't do it today, it wasn't going to happen this week.
Or next week.
Or next week, because I'm out next week. And so, like, on that note, I just want to remind people that sometimes life happens and we have stuff to do other than show this show. As much as we really try and do this every single week. Last week, we had a long weekend holiday. I was out moving house last week.
I was in Moscow.
Scott, you were in Moscow. Hunter was traveling. Hanselman, I think, was the only one who was around. No, he was traveling. He was at the White House.
Actually, he was at the White House.
So
this week, Hanselman's on vacation.
Yes, I've been sick.
You've been sick.
So I haven't been in, and I'm going to be going home again after this. And then next week, I'm in Europe for NDC. And so, you know, sometimes we just have these unfortunate periods where there are multiple weeks back to back where we just can't get a show out.
Well, also next week we'll be streaming .NET Conf.
Yes, .NET Conf is on.
So we have 3 days of .NET Conf material coming out next week. So
yeah,
that's where next week's show will be lost in that.
So you can. There's no conspiracy theories. It's never anything. It's never what it might appear to be to some people. It's just that we try and get it out every week, and sometimes people are sick or on the leave, or we have meetings or whatever it might be.
Well, we were laughing before the call that in the winter there's nothing for any of us to do.
No, so we're always here.
So we're always here, and now that it's summer and people are traveling and there's vacations and stuff's going on,
house and all that type of stuff. So anyway, so we're here now. So John, I believe you have like a year's worth of community links all stored up. So
I have 4,000 links. So I figured.
Okay, so let's rip through those.
Yep. All right. So this is cool. This is from Tien in Vietnam. He's written up a commerce system. So this is open source on GitHub, and you know, obviously it's he's gone through and it's localized it and all that. So some pretty cool stuff. Jerry Pelser, who runs the ASP.NET Weekly and does some other cool things. He's got this ASP.NET Core. He's got a thing talking about how to avoid checking in user secrets. So he talks about environment settings. He talks about secret manager or secret manager tool. So good reminders there. So this is from Jonathan, and he's talking about .NET Platform Standard and imports and how the two kind of work together. So yeah, this is cool. So in this example, he wanted to use reactive extensions. He talks about like, why isn't it working with you know, the version that he had picked for a platform standard, and
right,
you know, how you can pull it in with imports, but then some caveats there. This is cool from Martian. So he talked about how to set up ASP.NET Core with debugging on Ubuntu 16.04. So I believe the supported version is 14.04. So he kind of hacked around and got it working on 16.04. It works on his machine. So I think that's cool. So we've got 3 kind of migration guides that people have written up for how they migrated stuff from RC1 to RC2. So this one's from Dave Pine. You know, all 3 of these are pretty well, pretty thorough. This one's from Tuberk, and this one's from Eric L. Anderson. So all 3, a lot of good information. As always, people run into different gotchas as they move between versions, so all of these are useful.
It's also worth noting that we have a migration guide on the docs site as well, which was
docs.asp.net.
updated again just this week based on some feedback. So
Great. Okay, I'll put that link in as well. And as a reminder for people watching that don't remember, we always put up the list of all these links. They're all available in the post that kind of summarizes this show. So this is cool. This is from Mohammed Rehan Saeed, and he had to at work make a choice between using Azure Active Directory or Identity Server. So he kind of did a comparison of different features and what was supported. He ended up for his work using Azure Active Directory, but it's kind of nice kind of seeing how he, compared the different features and how to select. This is a post from Daria talking about Azure App Service and ASP.NET Core RC2, and talking about how you can customize the deployment script for that using Kudu. So from Pratap talking about MS Test framework support for .NET Core RC2 and ASP.NET Core RC2. So a couple of posts on EF6 or Entity Framework in general. This is Tony. He's written up code and explanation of using EF6 with ASP.NET Core. Julie Lehrman, of course, writes all kinds of stuff about Entity Framework. So here are very detailed posts about updating to RC2 and kind of what's different, and a lot of information there.
Cool.
And Ben Cole talking about EF migrations with ASP.NET Core. All right, Docker, a couple on Docker. So this is from Jurgis, and he walks through setting up. He's in his post, he's using OS 10, and he deploys to AWS. So pretty cool. And this one is from Sergio, and he walks through deploying RC2 on Docker. And he has some cool things at the very end where they're kind of like little bonus tracks. So he explains how to do some additional things, which is pretty nice. It's nice to kind of go beyond the hello world, and he shows some other things there. Deep dive into the ASP.NET Cores library from Andrew. Ben Foster talking about how to configure Kestrel URLs in RC2. So this is important, showing how to use the use URLs. I ran into this recently deploying to Docker Swarm. Important to be able to configure where the URLs are and stuff. So it's nice. Shane Boyer talking about how he had to call into WCF service from ASP.NET Core. So he explains how he set that up. So that's pretty useful there. This is Simone Chiretta talking about how to set up debugging for ASP.NET Core RC2 using Visual Studio Code. So talking about setting up the task runner there. All right, John shares some templates for doing React.js with ASP.NET Core and with MVC5. So there's nice project templates. David Paquette, he's got some. He's been doing a lot of stuff with tag helpers. You can look on his repos. He's got tons of different tag helpers he's been doing. So this is a distributed cache tag helper he's worked on.
Yeah, so that was actually a tag helper we added in RC2.
Ah, okay. So this is one he's explaining then, as opposed to
he's explaining one of the ones that we added in RC2.
See, I jumped to conclusions because he's published like 20
and
of them.
it was actually added as a result of the work Sebastian Ross did on Orchard.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So this is a huge picture of Rick Strahl surfing, but also talking about strongly typed configuration settings for ASP.NET Core. So as always, Rick's got tons of code here, very, very thorough post. And let me see, this is from Fayez, and he's talking about preventing cross-site request forgery with AngularJS apps. So very important when you're building kind of front-end applications to consider, anti-forgery. And so he explains how to do that with middleware. This is an interesting approach from Khalid, and he's talking about how there's kind of a common pattern in middleware where it'll say, if it's in development, if it's in staging, if it's production, blah, blah, blah. So he experimented with something. He said he's not sure if he likes it, but he's tried this Fluent approach where he said, dot development, dot when, dot always. And so kind of tacking on things there. So kind of a builder approach. And then 2 final ones here from Hisham. This one is optimizing CSS and JavaScript using a minifier tag helper. And this one is building a customizable language switcher tag helper with Bootstrap. So
cool.
Quite a few, but you know, it's always amazing how active the community is, and lately, especially with RC2, a lot of energy. People writing a lot of things, publishing things.
That's awesome.
There we go.
I hadn't seen more than half of those. So, I mean, I tend to monitor Twitter and stuff for new stuff that comes through, and a lot of those were new to me. So that's fantastic. Mind you, I've been out for the last week and a half, so that have a lot to do with it. When I wasn't, in bed. So very, very good. So what's happened? I haven't been here. What's happened in the last 2 weeks?
Well, we shipped RC2.
We shipped RC2. I was here for that.
So last Monday we shipped RC2.
Okay.
That was a big thing. And then we had a couple blog posts that talked about some changes in the projects and stuff like that.
Okay, so there was the one, I think it was about Compat. It was sort of titled about improving compatibility with .NET Core. And I think my understanding is that's the talk about the future of .NET Standard and bringing more APIs back,
right?
Basically to .NET Standard and thus .NET Core, because .NET Core will support whatever version of .NET Standard comes out in the future. There seemed to be a little bit of confusion about how that landed in terms of system runtime versus MS Core Lib and whether one is compatible with the other and how we're going to do those things. But
again, I don't think we even have the answers for those
things. That's the thing. The short story is we don't.
I think the big things we don't know.
Yeah.
I think the things that people should care about and what are important are, we care about two things. We want to have an awesome mobile story, which means we want to make .NET be great for building mobile apps on Xamarin and UWP. And we want to have an awesome web story or server story as well. And those two things have kind of conflicting issues where, in the case of like a UWP app, we natively compile that with the .NET Native runtime. And so we link out the parts of .NET that you're not using. So you get a nice small footprint thing. In the Xamarin world, they have a bigger version of .NET Mono that they're using right now to actually link out stuff to make their apps small. But as we bring back stuff, some people were worried that maybe we're going to make the web apps get bigger. And I think it's important for people to realize that it is a goal to make sure that web apps, that when we started doing ASP.NET Core, ASP.NET 5 2 years ago, one of the hopes was, hey, we can let you build really small web apps that run in containers or run on servers. And I don't think that anything that we're saying about bringing stuff back is meant to take any of that away.
No, and I think there was a little confusion about when people hear MS Core Lib again, that was interpreted by some parties as meaning, well, everything that's on GitHub then is wasted because all the perf improvements we did aren't in MS Core Lib, they're all in the system.star, system runtime based stuff. But I think there's just a mix that people don't quite understand where that code goes and how that gets used. The reality is, it doesn't matter if the API was MS Core Lib based or system runtime based, .NET Core will always get the benefits that you're going to get from what we checked in GitHub, right?
Yeah, well, in some cases, people saw that we took stuff out of MS Core Lib and we kind of split stuff out.
Right.
We were factoring MS Core Lib in a lot of cases. We brought collections and stuff like that out into their own assemblies, and maybe those go back in.
Right.
But that work that we did to refactor doesn't go away because the linker technology or whatever we use, I don't know what magic wand we'll use, but whatever thing we use, we'll be able to still link at those boundaries that we created. So I think there was confusion about, are you referencing those small assemblies that we created in front of MS Core Lib, or are you going to reference MS Core Lib? I think for compatibility, it'll probably be something like you reference MS Core Lib, and we do all the other stuff behind the scenes for you.
And I think there probably will be some aspect of something redirects to something, and something redirects to something else, but that may be different depending on whether you're in a Xamarin app or in a .NET Core app, for example. And we haven't figured those details out yet. I think the salient point, which was the blog post was trying to say, is that we want more of the API available that all the .NET code that already exists on the planet understands, which is everything that was in MS Core Lib, which isn't all the BCL. That's the other thing. The MS Core Lib isn't the BCL. It is the root of the BCL, but the BCL was much, much larger than that, or the framework class library, and had system dot all types of things, which some of those may never come over to .NET Core or to .NET Standard. They may stay in the .NET framework, but other bits might. But they're separate to MS Core Lib.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of discussions that come out of this. One is the goal is to say that any Xamarin customer can easily take their code and move it to UWP, or you can take UWP code and move it to Xamarin, or you can take either of those and move them to Core on server.
Or Unity.
Or Unity.
Right.
So the idea is make code more interoperable, make packages that customers build be able to work across the entire ecosystem and not have to have folder after folder after folder inside of a package to support each of these specialized versions of .NET. I call this the unification of .NET, which is let's have a nice, small, unified .NET standard part of .NET.
So this is mostly about packages, right? I mean, or a lot of the impact is about
it's not packages. I would say it would be, if it's not packages per se, but it would be, we want to enable package authors to easily be able to build a package that can be used across Xamarin, Unity, UWP, desktop, and server. That's the only part that packages, I think, comes into this. It really is we've built all these different .NETs over the years, and they're all slightly different piles of UIs, APIs. And let's try to reconcile that back and have, I call this taking the platform back over and having the .NET team own what is the .NET platform and what is the standard set of APIs that work everywhere. If you look at the PCL case, it was the smallest intersection of everything. That was all you could actually share. Now we're saying we're going to go share a whole bunch more across all those stacks. This should be better for everybody.
It should be better for people who are trying to move workloads to .NET Core as well, because it means .NET Core is going to get more APIs now. And people have to remember that .NET Core is itself a platform. It's like one of those verticals on the top.
Yes.
That happens to also be what UWP is built on. It's what the thing that we just shipped RC2, that thing called .NET Core, the server workload sort of console app thing. That's what that's based on. And then .NET Framework is a separate vertical. Xamarin is a separate vertical. Unity is a separate vertical. Yes. But we want to share what we call .NET underneath that in terms of API is this thing called .NET Standard. And it's just about getting more API in there in a nice, portable, easy to understand fashion, so that no matter what vertical you choose, or if you're not even choosing a vertical, if you're building a package or building a library, it's the same .NET. Like everyone gets the same .NET.
Everybody gets the same .NET.
And the verticals will always have unique API that makes sense to their vertical. But in terms of .NET as a wide sort of ecosystem, it's one set of API for everyone that always goes up and always gets bigger, and and fails in a predictable way if you try and use a particular API in a certain way on a certain platform.
Right.
Okay.
One of the thing I saw in the community when I saw some of the reactions to some of that stuff is people are like, when we built .NET Core, we actually removed things, and some things that we removed, they were things that, hey, we don't think you should use these anymore, or whatnot. If we bring stuff back, it doesn't mean we have to put it in .NET Standard. So
right.
there might be things in MS Core Lib. If we brought all of MS Core Lib back, we haven't designed all this yet.
Yep.
But as we design this, we might say that, hey, there's stuff we're going to bring back, and we're not going to put it in .NET Standard because that's not what we think is portable between all these things.
I see.
So .NET Standard and MS Core Lib should not be considered to be the same thing.
Okay.
That's, we have to figure that out.
Okay.
Can you clarify timing? Because we've got, RTM coming up soon that we have announced on the roadmap, right? And then we're talking about like changes and stuff. And I think I've seen some community confusion on that as well. Like, does that mean we're changing what's in this RTM that's coming up, or
no? So I would. This really isn't a big change. This is just about what we're planning. This is a roadmap. This is about planning what type of APIs are we looking to add to .NET Standard and the wider .NET ecosystem, as Scott just pointed out. What APIs can people expect will work on .NET Core-based platforms? Will work on Xamarin. Will work on Unity. Will work on .NET Framework moving forward. I mean, because version 1 isn't the end. Obviously, we weren't going to ship RTM and then say these are all the APIs you get on .NET Core. You're never going to get any more, right? So I think previously, though, our plans around how we were going to add API there was that we'd go through a similar process as to what we did with .NET Core originally, which was we look at all the APIs and we carve them up and we refactor them and we decide what should stay and what should go. And I think with the acquisition of Xamarin and with the recognition of the much wider .NET community like Unity and those type of things, and the rising tide lifts all boats type of mentality, is that it's going to be better for everyone if everyone has the most API that's applicable to them available. And it makes it easier for people to target .NET, whether they're package authors or verticals or polyglot programmers who do Unity and they do Xamarin and they do a bit of server stuff, but they just want to have the same sort of .NET. And this is something that .NET Framework kind of used to promise when it was this big monolith. It was the same set of APIs for everyone. It was just that it was really big and it was Windows focused. But this isn't a change as such. This isn't really, everything after RTM is going to change. Like the APIs that you have in .NET Core 1.0 RTM will always be
They're not going to go away.
And then it's just that we're going to add more. And some of those will come from MS Core Lib, because we're going to start looking at rolling some of those APIs back into the standard and thus back into some future version of .NET Core. Some of them will be new APIs just for .NET Core. Some of them will be brand new APIs that everyone's going to get, that we're going to add to standard that haven't come from anywhere. But whether they go into MS Core Lib some version, or into system.runtime some version, or into something else, or just into a package that you have to reference, but is also referenced by the standard library, so you get it implicitly. Those things will be decided API to API, I think is the way to think about that. But as a program, as a developer using .NET, it's just like, well, there's more API coming down the line. That's all I really have to think about. There's going to be no rehashing or re-architecture.
Right. I saw some people react to this thing, oh, it's another big change or turn of direction. And it's not. As Damien said, we always plan to add more APIs in the future. So the RTM that'll happen at the end of June will be the RTM, and when the next version of .NET Standard comes out, your app's not going to break. This is just going to be more APIs show up, and you can use them when they show up. So I don't think if you're a developer and you're looking at ASP.NET Core or .NET Core, you shouldn't worry that this is another fork in the road or we're going to make some huge change. We always plan to bring more APIs back. And I think we'll even bring stuff back outside of the .NET Standard as well. We always talked about, hey, it'd be great to have ADO.NET data tables and data sets. There's all kinds of stuff we'd love to bring back, even outside maybe even .NET Standard, so always more APIs are going to come back. So this is not a fork or a change. This is just more goodness for everybody.
But in terms of timing, getting back to your original question, we don't have concrete timing, and I'm always reticent to talk about timing on this show anyway, but the reality is the only time frame we have right now is the RTM of .NET Core, which people would have noticed on GitHub we've started preparing for already. And so in the current, what are we, 2nd of June, we said last month that we were aiming for the end of June for that RTM. The plan around tooling for that being in preview hasn't changed, and so there will be a subsequent tooling preview that goes along with .NET Core 1.0 RTM at the end of this month. What does that mean? That means the .NET Core CLI and SDK, it means the Visual Studio tools, it means the Visual Studio Code tools, et cetera, templates, those type of things will still be in preview, and those things may change before we get those to RTM, which we already announced we plan to do as part of the VS15 sort of wave, whenever that RTMs. So that's kind of the timing behind that. But in terms of API and .NET Standard versioning, that will continue to be invested in and continue to be versioned sort of irrespective of any of the other platforms. I mean, not that it won't line up, it probably will, like we always do. We like to line up certain releases, but we don't have a stake in the ground for .NET Standard 1.8 or .NET Standard 2 right now. We're working through what we talked about in that blog post, and as that blog post says, as we get more detail, we'll do another blog post, and we'll add the next layer, and we'll add the next layer again and again. But this is just about us trying to find a more controlled cadence for sort of disseminating this type of information and these type of decisions as they're made in the team, rather than it, we don't want it to be ad hoc, and we don't want it to be, oh, we said something on the stand-up and now everyone thinks our stuff is different.
That's actually been a problem. We say things in the stand-up and it kind of gets out of control, because on the stand-up it's just you and I, or you and Hanselman, or you and John talking, and all the context between what we're doing might not be there. And that's why we're now kind of signing up to saying we're going to blog on a weekly basis of what we're working on, what we're doing. You saw that with Emo's post on Monday of this week. Expect something from each week from us to talk about what we're doing. We might even put something in the bottom of each of these things that kind of talks about what we're working on. All up, because I read some confusion. People were like, I can't believe you made some of these decisions and you haven't designed these things yet. And we had our first design meeting on MSBuild last week. That was the first time we all got in a room as a group and talked about that. And so don't assume just because we talk about the direction on the show that we've actually mapped all this stuff out. As Damien said, it's how we can't associate with a particular release.
I mean, and just to point on that a little bit, it's like sometimes you have to set the direction before you can start the planning. You can't plan without any idea of where you're going. And
even at Build, our direction was, hey, let's start trying to unify .NET. And that's when we announced the .NET Standard at Build, and we showed some slides talking about PCLs and stuff like that. We hadn't even figured out how to do it at that point. It was just like, this is what we know, the vision. If you look at the .NET vision moving forward, we want to unify Xamarin, UWP, server.
And the Xamarin acquisition only finalized, 3 days or something before Build?
Before Build.
So that was very just in time, last minute, that whole direction change. I mean, it was somewhat predictable once we'd made the public announcement about the Xamarin acquisition. Okay, well, we're going to want to unify this story a bit better. Obviously, we want to make it better for customers. But we have to set a direction before we can then go off to the next level of planning, and that's part of us being open. That's how I interpret it anyways. Part of us as being open is that we will inform you of these direction changes or these direction refinements, or when we just set a direction in the first time, before we go off and start doing a whole bunch of planning, because we do want people to be involved to some degree with these types of changes. And we want to give you a heads up and say, hey, the project JSON thing, we made this decision to step back, take a look at some of the issues we were facing. I don't want to say anything new. Everything I'm about to say was in the blog post.
We've not said anything on the show today that's not already blogged out in the blog post.
To reiterate, we stepped back. We were facing some challenges with the project JSON project model. We just acquired Xamarin. We were looking at the wider landscape, looking at this new direction of we want to unify .NET, and we felt the best thing to do, the best direction to head in to do that as a first step was to sort of unify around one build model, which had to be the incumbent. That was the obvious choice of MSBuild. And so that's how that came about. And as Scott said, we just had the first sort of real sit-down planning meeting on that last week.
What that actually will look like. Yeah, I've actually had a chance to go and talk to a couple user groups and speak at a few events talking about the Project JSON thing as well. And the way I like to look at it is, we had this monumental task of trying to make Project JSON do everything that MSBuild did, which we could have worked on for the next 2 years. And we could have gone and worked to find a way to put Project JSON into every project type that does .NET. A colossal effort for us going back to the incumbent, supporting the incumbent, and making it better. And so I think one of the things that's lost in translation there is as we internally realized that we didn't want to spend 2 years working on Project JSON, that we'd give more value to the customers if we actually went back to MSBuild. We don't plan to give up all the things that we learned from Project JSON. Each of those things that we learned, we plan to put back into MSBuild and into CSproj. I mean, comically enough, what a lot of people don't even realize is Xproj is technically a CSproj already.
It is.
It's just a CSproj that we fixed a few of the things that were wrong with CSproj as the web team saw it when we started the ASP.NET thing 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's not. It already was technically CSproj.
Yeah, I mean, it was a sort of a thin veil across.
It was, but it did globbing, and globbing actually was supported by MSBuild already. It's just that CSproj and Visual Studio doesn't support globbing.
So I think the important point there was that this isn't the end, right? I mean, we get everything realigned back on MSBuild. We get everything working well. The interop works well. It works as well as MSBuild does today, whatever you interpret that to mean. And then we go, okay, what can we do to make MSBuild better for everybody? What can we do to make this experience that is the foundation of the .NET Core project model better for all customers? And going back to what you said before, is that we do have some competing sort of pulling interest. Like when you're doing client development, there are some things that are quite different and have very different needs to when you're doing server development. There's a lot of overlap as well. And a lot of the time we do innovations in one area that we look back on a year later and go, well, that actually would apply really well if we did it over here as well. And you've seen that over the 15 years that .NET's been around, and that will continue to happen. One vertical will get a certain innovation first, and then we'll flow that into something else. But we really want to try and put most of our effort and our innovation and our investment into the shared parts of .NET, whether that be the compiler or the jitter or the runtime or the standard library or the tooling, or and sort of leave the verticals to innovate where it makes sense for their verticals. But when you think about .NET, we want to share as much of that goodness as possible, and that means getting everyone onto the same bits so that we can then improve them for the whole .NET ecosystem. That's the way I think about it.
That's the way I think of it as well. I mean, I also think about it. Remember we talked about if you look at UWP today. There's APIs that don't exist there because somebody thought, hey, there's a API in Windows that does this, and so we'll just hide the .NET API for this. This is back to what I want to say is we've taken .NET back. We've taken .NET over, and we own .NET. We own the APIs in .NET. We're going to make them the same everywhere, which I think is a strong message to .NET customers. Your knowledge works everywhere. The languages, the compilers, the jitter, we're sharing all that stuff.
Cool. All right. Anything, John? I haven't got anything to add after that. Is that the two? That covers the two blog posts, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I similar kinds of. It's funny. I was in Moscow. Same questions. It's same sort of thing. So I think it is. And like you're saying, a lot of that stuff is spelled out in the blog posts, and it's just not, it takes some careful reading and understanding of.
Yeah, and I think we've been answering questions on the blog post too. I know Richard and Emo and others have been answering, and so I think that would be the preferred when we make one of these weekly or whatever cadence is going to be blog posts about an announcement.
I hope weekly. So.
If you have questions, ask a question on the blog post, and someone from the team will come and help clarify any points that aren't. I mean, we don't always get everything perfectly clear when we write the blog post, and so it does help to interact with customers on the same place that everyone else can read it, rather than you and I having a discussion here like we've just done, or something on Twitter or something in Slack or whatever it might be. I think it's better for everyone if there's one place where we make, we give the weekly updates, or what, as Scott said, we hope to do weekly updates, and we can make sure that people understand that message there.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Is one of the things that we struggled with, I think, as a team, is we've done some things on Twitter, some things on Slack, some things on the community stand-up, some things on.net, which is our other kind of stand-up thing. And if you're a customer of ours, that's all over the place. And so we're going to try to really centralize things on the blog and have all the major announcements and the context behind the major announcements happen on the blog. And that's going to be where the big stuff happens. Yep. And we might answer some questions on these shows.
Yeah.
Or go into some side details or whatnot. But really the blog is going to be the main thing. And we're going to commit to actually blogging on a really regular basis.
That's good. I mean, and I'd love to get this show back to, obviously, as we get towards RTM, people are going to start asking, like I am, well, what features are we going to do in ASP.NET after June? Because we'll be back to doing new features again. Obviously, we'll be doing bug fixes and things because we always have bugs. But if people keep asking about SignalR, there's a bunch of middleware. We don't have response caching yet. Web pages has come up many times. So I'd love to start talking about those features again on this show, as this is the ASP.NET community standard.
That's actually the most exciting thing for me the last week or so, that being in the team room, is hearing the team start talking about ASP.NET features again. So we've been so focused on .NET CLIs and shared frameworks and all these underpinning things that we've actually not really done or talked about ASP.NET in a while.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to getting back to that. David Fowler just asked me to talk about something that people are still confused about, and that is having a runtime that's RTMing at the end of June on preview tooling.
Okay, so runtime and libraries, RTM, but tooling.
But the tooling stays preview. So we should probably talk a little bit about that. And the way I like to think of that is, this was a realization that I think actually hit a few of us. I think it was David Fowler, maybe you and me, a few of us, that I was sitting there and saying, in some ways the tooling was actually holding up our frameworks. Our frameworks were actually in great shape. We'd done all the feature work in ASP.NET that we really wanted to for a 1.0. We thought we were in really good shape. .NET Core is, hey, it's code that we actually took from the .NET framework, so it's pretty solid code. And so it came to realization that the runtimes, and by the way, we also have lots of customers that are actually running in production on RC1 and have been asking us, hey, when are you going to have an RTM version for us? And there's other customers that want to go and put their RTM bits out there. And we thought to ourselves, why are we holding up everything on tooling? So the reality is we're shipping the RTM at the end of June because ASP.NET Core and .NET Core are ready today. They're not, we're running them through stress labs, security reviews. We're doing all the things to make those things good. They already have great feature sets. They've had them since even RC1 in November. And those things are done. And so the reason we're going to RTM those is they're ready to go. The reason the tooling is still RC is because, yeah, we have the Project JSON thing we're talking about still. What are we going to do with MSBuild and Project JSON? I don't want to make my customers wait another 3 months or 6 months or who knows how long for us to actually figure out all those things when we have great bits that run good today.
The ones that, and just to point on that a little bit as well, the customers that are currently served by the capabilities of those bits. Part of the MSBuild thing is about allowing more customers to use those bits that perhaps can't now because they don't have the type of
and to share code across project types and stuff like that.
We do have customers right now who don't necessarily need those particular capabilities, who are running in production.
Yes.
And who really want us to do an RC2 and to do the RTM and do the subsequent, so we can get the real support and those type of things that they really need to run their workloads in production. For the other customers who are still holding off because they go, well, I really need to interop with my 40 other CS projects. That will come a bit later.
That's when you wait for the MSBuild tooling and you're going to be in a happier place. But if you're already running, if you've got an ASP.NET Core application you've already built today, it's already running, this is your chance to go put that stuff up, and we have a go live. We have a fully supported. We'll do security patches. We'll do whatever for those bits.
Yep.
Those bits are ready to go. If you need the stuff that the MSBuild tooling is going to bring for you, then you can wait for that.
Yep.
The other thing is customers should realize that we are going to make it super easy to move from the RTM Preview 2 tooling bits that are going to be out at the end of June to the Visual Studio 15 bits when they come out. This is not going to be another fork in the road where you've got to go and hand convert your project JSON or hand convert your startup.cs files. We will make this a open your project and we convert it and it runs again. So customers should not be freaked out about, hey, now I'm going to wait for the RTM tooling. That's not going to be another fork. Even though things are going to change, we've discussed and said we're going to find a way to make this transparent to the customer, meaning that you open your project and it will just compile and run automatically. This should not be something where you have to go change your source code, change files to make it go.
Yep.
We fail if we can't make that happen.
Right. Okay. So I hope that at least adds something. Now, I understand there'll be some people who will have heard that and gone, well, I still think it's weird that you're doing an RTM runtime and a preview tooling, and we acknowledge that.
It is weird.
You've heard it is weird. Like it's not without precedent. It has happened before. It happened with UWP last year. The runtime was RTM. It shipped in Windows 10. The tooling didn't come out for a month or so after that. And so you heard the reason why we did it. We have customers who want to use the bits right now. They're already using the bits right now. We feel the bits in terms of running production workloads are ready to go. We're ready to support them. We want people to use them in production so that we can give them the support that they need with the production workload, which includes security fixes, high impact stress fixes, those type of things. Some of those things require us to become RTM for some customers to actually make that leap. And so we think we're ready to do that. The tooling does have some edges. It does have some things that we know. The big thing is that we know tooling is going to change. The big thing is that tooling, we don't want to make an RC or an RTM because we know it's going to change. We know the project file is going to change. We know the way that the VS tooling that interrupts with other project systems is going to change. It will get easier, it will get better, but it's going to change from what it is right now. So we didn't want to make that an RTM and then.
But our commitment to customers is it's not going to. Your apps are going to still build and run the way they did today.
And that initial migration should be fully automatic. That's what we're trying to achieve. Is that whether you're using the .NET CLI with VS Code or you're using Visual Studio, when you first open that project, we want that conversion to be interactive but automatic. And then obviously from that point on, it will be one of the new projects.
And I'll give you another reason why we made this decision to do this was we thought, Damien can attest to this, we sat in a room in November and said, hey, we think by the end of January we'll have transition from DNX to .NET CLI. And as you guys saw, that transition was not in January, that was in May. So that went from November to May. I'm not saying that's going to happen with this MSBuild thing, but I don't want to hold my customers up for an unknown time when we have bits that run great today.
Yeah, especially when we just said we had the first meeting, the real first design meeting last week. Because and again, why was it only last week when we made the announcement quite a few weeks ago? We're busy shipping RC2 and we're busy shipping RTM. We informed people of the direction that we were headed and why the tooling runtime split was being made. That's why there's a difference in the name of RTM versus preview, because there's changes coming. But we didn't actually start the work with the full body of people that will be involved until last week. Now, obviously, some people had spoken before that, obviously, but the working group started last week, and so that work will now continue, and we'll keep people up to date on the blog about where we're at on that, and hope people adds a little clarity.
I want to address one more thing for people that are watching. I did read other feedback that saddened me. And the feedback was, hey, when the ASP.NET team was doing all this, it was great. And now when the .NET team got involved, it all kind of turned into this weird thing. And I want to be very clear to people that the ASP.NET team and the .NET team are the same team. There are no longer two different teams. We are all the same team. That happened in late January, and we've been the same teams since then. And the other thing is, a lot of the people that were pushing to pull us back off of Project JSON were technically people that were used to be in the ASP.NET team. So it was the ASP.NET team that actually started probably the conversation of, oh my God, we've created yet another project system, and trying to make it work with all the things in Visual Studio and Xamarin and stuff is too much. So I just want people to hear that from the source, that This was not a .NET team versus ASP.NET team kind of thing. This is all of us holistically looking at the product and saying, what is best for all of our customers? Yes. And our customers are not just the bleeding edge people that are building ASP.NET core apps.
It's not just the 212 people watching now.
Or the people watching this. It is the people building WinForms, the people building Xamarin, the people building Unity, the people building. We care about all the platforms, and so these decisions were not made just for the ASP.NET team. They're made for the product all up. We are all the .NET team, and I think that's important for people to understand that.
Okay. So the Q&A is broken again. So no one knows how to get Q&A working on Hangouts anymore. But I think we've run long enough today anyway. It's been about 45 minutes. So thanks everyone for tuning in. John, you got anything to add before we close out?
Nothing else. Get better. Have fun and awesome.
Let's remember, we're going to skip next week because we have .NET Conf next week and we have people traveling next week, and so we'll probably be back on the air the week after. Yeah,
back to our normally scheduled program 2 weeks, a little under 2 weeks from now. All going well.
Yep.
So, cue dramatic zoom out myself.
Dramatic zoom out. There you go.